there. Welcome to another episode of Heart of CUR, the podcast in which we go deep into the heart and the soul of Curaçao's International Airport. I'm your host, Joanna Costa Gomez, and today we're diving into a topic that is crucial to the smooth running of our skies. Safety and security, civil safety and security, so crucial. That's why it's an honor to have with us today Peter Steinmetz, Peter, we should say. Peter Steinmetz, he's the Director General of the Curaçao's Civil Aviation Authority. So, Peter, before we go into the more technical and serious aspects of this podcast, we love to start with an icebreaker. So, I would love to know from the perspective of the Civil Aviation Authority, what is something you think that travelers don't appreciate enough about the travel industry or while they're at an airport?
Well, Joanne, first of all, let me welcome you in our offices.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'm glad you pay attention to a thing which is not really in the news every day. Our function and our task is to look after security and safety, as you mentioned, in the aviation industry. And that's particularly relevant for the industry and the economic development of the island. So what travelers would not notice probably is that all organizations and all people which work in relation to their flights have been audited by us, have been certified by us.
Everybody.
Well, not the people in the food and beverage, but otherwise, is it air traffic control? Is it the airport? Are the airlines? Is it ground handling? All these organizations have been certified by us, and we perform oversight on them. I think it's not really well known that's our main business.
And when you say certified by the Civil Aviation Authority, what does that imply? So you would do a background check, and what else?
No, it's basically certified in the sense of the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, has developed standards and practices under which the civil aviation industry has to function. Now, this is an international organization. Curaçao is a member state to that agreement which has been reached. And that organization that issues regulations. And regulations have to be applied nationally. So what we do is we take these international regulations, we transfer them into national legislation, and then enforce them on the industry.
Sounds easy, but I would imagine it is not.
It's a lot of regulations. Let me say it that way. So it reflects either.
What kind of regulations?
It reflects airlines. Operations of airlines, the airworthiness of aircraft, the training of people, the airport, the air traffic control organization, is it dangerous goods, has it to do with security. All for these subjects are specific regulations.
That sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
How does a civil aviation authority on an island, a small island such as Curaçao, make sure it can comply with all those 40 regulations that I would imagine bigger countries with bigger civil aviation authorities, those are the same rules. But you are smaller, you maybe have less capacity as a human capital and people. How does that work? How do you make it happen?
Yes, that's
to keep us safe.
You're perfectly right there. The rules apply for everybody in the same way. And that is a challenge, given the capacity that we have. Not we only, but all small island states have that same problem, basically. You have to apply the same rules and regulations, and like you mentioned, in bigger countries, you have more staff and more resources to do that. Not only human resources, but also financially. For us, it is a challenge to implement all that. I wouldn't deny that, but through cooperation, partly within the kingdom of the Netherlands, and also regionally with ICAO, we try to do our best. And I think we are managing that.
You're managing perfectly because you're still here
Well,
and doing a.
perfectly, I have to ask other people whether we we manage
We're
perfectly.
safe, right?
But I think we are
Yes.
safe. Yes, and we do inspect and audit all players in the field from time to time, which means that we go there. Our inspectors go there. We audit everything they have, both in procedures, in work procedures, manuals, trainings, whatever have you. And that's been quite satisfactory so far.
Would you say that maybe like more modern technological advances, even artificial intelligence, if you will, that people are using more and more, could help facilitate Curacao Civil Aviation Authority in the future into being able to carry this load a little more easily?
Yeah, I think we're still in the forefront of these kind of developments, but I don't exclude that that might be an opportunity in the future.
Okay.
Again, we are following there a little bit the International Civil Aviation Organization, who is developing standards in all these areas, so that we don't have to invent them ourselves. We merely have to adopt them and apply them to the local situation. These developments you mentioned, like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and drones and what have you, that's still very much in development.
Okay,
So
so that's
we are following that process, obviously, and when the regulations are ready to be implemented, we will surely implement these.
But I would imagine, because again, not to stay too much on this part of the topic, but as a, I mean, Curacao is a small island. Like previously stated, we do have to comply with international standards. So, and you do comply with international standards. So I would imagine that other even bigger countries could learn a lot from how we do things here, because you manage to do a lot of what they do with a lot more people and a lot more capacity with less people and less resources. Is that a correct premise to look about the situation?
I think in general, it's a bit early to say that we might have some specialisms in within our organization, but I think in general we are following what is being published, and again our capacity is limited, so it's a very simple issue.
It's a simple reality.
We don't have money or time to spare actually.
So you're very efficient in what you do and how
We
you
have
do
to.
it.
We have to. That's the only way to do it.
You're being very
obviously.
humble about it, but it's
Yeah, well, look, it's not like Curacao is the only one with the same challenges. All these island states in Caribbean region have the same challenges. So we do discuss together. We coordinate efforts. But yeah, it's always a challenge, and for sure the United States or Europe with EASA or Canada has more resources. But nobody can deny that.
And just Peter, to learn a little more about you, because when we're talking to you, you're very, I said humble, but you're very, like in Dutch they say, nuchter. About this stuff, and that maybe has to do also a little with how long you've been in this industry and how much experience you have also. 4 decades of experience in this industry, that's a lot. How has this journey been? Where did it start and why? How did you end up at this destination here in Curacao at the Civil Aviation Authority? Because you have worked on other islands, you have worked in other areas as well. So tell us a bit about your journey, your flight through aviation.
How did you deduct that? Do I look that old?
No, you look experienced.
Well, thank you. No, yeah, it's been a journey through life within aviation actually, and a lot of it within airports. Maybe some of your listeners or viewers might recognize me from Aruba, where I've been working as an airport director for 10 years. And before that, it was international things at Schiphol Airport and the Civil Aviation Department of the Ministry in Holland, Fokker Aircraft Company, and Economic Affairs, where they dealt with aircraft development. So basically a little bit of everything combined, so that helps me see the wider perspective of everything. And I think that whatever is important today is always a little bit less important tomorrow. So that's why you
Interesting.
should be a little bit relative into the hypes of this world.
How does Curacao stand out in all your previous experiences, living and working here?
You know, I've been working in the world, in Asia, in Eastern Europe, and in the Caribbean region. You always have to be prepared for challenges. They're always different, but you have to be prepared, and you have to know that challenges are coming. So every country has its own, how to say, this environment to work in, which is fine, and rightfully so. But the only thing is expected from me is flexibility. I have to adjust to what is here and not the other way around. So an open mind, an open mindset is important, and knowing that you will get surprises always.
Surprises are good.
Surprises don't have to be negative.
They keep you on your toes.
Yes, but it is.
And in aviation, I mean, if you're working in rules every day, I would imagine that they're welcome.
But if you're new in a culture, you not always can place the events against the background that there is. So that's why you have to be flexible in reacting on that. And I think we're doing, with my colleagues, we're doing a fine job here. But is it easy? No, it's not, because of what I just said earlier. Capacity is an issue. It is. It's not easy to find people. It's not easy to find money to pay people within the government. They have to be trained. Everybody has to be trained. When he or she arrives here, you're not immediately an expert. You might have your background, but it applies for me as well. You need 1 or 2 years further education before you can act in the functions that we have here. So it's a challenge in that respect. Even if you have enough people, they still have to be educated in the way that they can be productive. So we're going through that process. Currently, we are in a situation where we can employ the number of people that we want. So now we have to employ these additional colleagues in a way that they can be productive in a year or two. So
a lot is happening.
Just money is not sufficient. Just people is not sufficient.
Is it always? Is it ever?
Is it ever?
Do you ever have enough money and
patience
people?
is important.
Patience and the grit to make things happen.
Yeah.
If we can go a bit into the one of the key aspects of your work, landing permits. So I would imagine that every airplane that flies into our airspace but also wants to land on Curacao would need some kind of permit from the aviation authority as to, okay, you are safe, it's okay for you to land or fly through our airspace. How does that work? So can you take us through that process of what you do and why it's important?
Yeah, sure, I can. It consists actually of a couple of stages. So if I can say, the first stage is a generic treaty between the two countries involved. You have an airline from one country wants to fly to another country, so there are two countries involved. These countries have to conclude an international treaty on air services. That's part of our work, what we do as well. We do it with Foreign Affairs from the General Affairs Ministry. Having that in place, which can take quite a long time before it's ready, by the way, a couple of years. But if that's in place, then an airline can apply for flights between the two countries. If it is a Curaçao airline, it has all our permits already, because otherwise it's not an airline which is certified here. So from us, what you're asking is mainly has to do with foreign airlines, airlines from abroad. These airlines have to show, according to our regulations, that they comply with certain safety criteria, which are mentioned in our regulations, which they can find on our website, so they're publicly known. And it has basically to do with safety and security again. The operations specifications of the aircraft, the insurance of the aircraft, the certification of the staff, security procedure manual, all these kind of things which have to do with the safe operation of the aircraft. And if we are convinced that that is the case, and they have the right to fly under the treaty, what I mentioned earlier, then we do issue an authorization.
How long does that process
Well, it
last?
depends mostly on the airline itself, because They have to collect and submit quite a number of documents. I have to admit it's quite a list. It's, if somebody wants to check it, it is in our part 10 of our regulations. So if they don't submit the full list, then
Then you cannot do your job.
we cannot issue the authorization. So once they have issued or submitted every document, then it's basically a couple of days.
Okay, and how often do they have to do that? So basically, if you have airline Joanne, I submit a request, I submit all my documents.
Yes,
you
if
check
I
the
and if I
process.
don't know you from before as an airline, then I have to ask you all the documents that you have been issued by your own country that allow you to fly. If of course the next year you come back and you say, okay, now this year I want to fly instead of 2 times, 5 times, that's a much more simple process, of course.
So it's every time they want to change their frequency coming into our island, and then every other kind of couple of months they have to
It depends
ask.
again on themselves, no? If they apply for 3 months or a week or for 3 years, it all depends on the application they submit.
And would you say that you often have to say no or restrict airlines?
Well, the issue is mostly that to get all these documents, that they takes time. And although you would expect airlines to have the same experience in every country they fly to, which you should, it's sometimes difficult for them to come up with the right documents. So in that case, the authorization is delayed. It's not often that it is denied, but we just want to make sure, we want to be safe on the safe side and know that their procedures, their manuals, their papers are all in order. If that's the case, then the last thing we can do is we go inspect their operations. So at any certain day, we go to the aircraft when it's here at the airport, and we inspect all their papers, which they have to have on board, all their
So
procedures.
every time they come,
Well, you could do it every time, but nobody does that. So you do it
spot check
spot
at
checks.
random.
Yes, correct.
Interesting.
So it's a kind of 3 stages issue: treaty, papers for the authorization, and then a spot check on what they say that they're doing.
And is there a difference? Because I mentioned in my question airplanes flying through our airspace and the ones landing. But do airplanes that fly through our space have to comply with certain security and safety criteria as well? Or is that a whole different process?
There are 2 airspaces as far as we are concerned. We have the airspace over Curaçao, which is actually a very small airspace because
Yeah.
it is the country, the island, plus a couple of nautical miles. So that's a very small area. But there's also the flight information region, which DCANSP is managing, the air traffic control organization. That is free and open to everybody in the world.
Yeah.
That area, which is pretty big, goes up to not entirely, but to Santo Domingo and a little bit to the west and the east and the south to Venezuela. That's a big area where aircraft fly through. For instance, if you have Avianca flights to Europe, they all fly through our airspace, our flight information region. There you can't do, you can't imply sanctions. But if it's over our own airspace, then you could imply sanctions. And it's interesting you're asking because the European Union has issued all kinds of sanctions against Russian aircraft, Russian crew, Russian aircraft owners, which we have to check, basically.
When they come into our...
If any of these landing permits which have been requested or overflight over the island, then we have to check basically if all these aircraft are not, or these persons in the aircraft are not on the forbidden sanction list, which is a hell of a lot of work, which I'm not waiting for at the moment, actually.
But you actually...
But it is, yes, so we could do that based on these kind of regulations.
So it's your job as civil aviation authority to also check who's on what plane that lands.
It's unfortunately has become part of our work. Look, it has nothing to do with safety and security. It has to do with international sanctions
and geopolitical.
And somebody has to enforce it. Okay, where do the applications come? They come here. So
You have to check.
We have to check.
We have a few minutes left, but I don't want to let you go without asking about
Well,
cybersecurity.
you don't let me go because in
No,
my
because
own office.
I want to stay here in this office with our podcast because it's so interesting. We should do another podcast with you, Peter. But I have to ask about cybersecurity. Why? Because if we think about the future of civil aviation, cybersecurity, we all know, is one of the biggest risks when it comes to a lot of factors. Also for our island, for many, I think most countries. How do you protect yourself against that? Is that a big issue? Is that a thing for us here at Civil Aviation Curacao?
Well, it's not a matter of whether you're going to be hacked, but the question is when you're going to be hacked, and that applies apparently to everybody, as I hear the commercial on the Curacao radio. It is a very concerning area, and that's recognized by everybody in the industry, and first and foremost by the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is organizing common views on this subject and regulation on the issue. I can't say that is finalized, but it's very much in development. Having said that, I think it will stay in development because the developments go
Fast.
quick and fast, and so I'm a little afraid that whatever kind of regulations we are going to implement here will always be a bit behind what is really happening. Yeah, but regulations come after the fact.
Yeah.
So especially in this area, it's a reason for concern. I'd like to repeat what I said earlier. Let us be guided basically by that international organization at the moment. We don't develop our own regulations in this area.
You don't develop it, but you do comply and you do enforce it. And because of all your hard work, everybody that travels to our island and from our island knows that they are traveling through a safe space, which you do have a civil aviation authority that ensures and our safety and security.
Well, that is the function I'm tasked with, and we try with my colleagues. And let me say, we have currently some 25 colleagues. We try to comply with that, order basically. So.
Thank you for that. I feel a lot calmer and happy now that I'm more aware, right? When we are walking through an airport, through CUR, not any airport, but CUR. And I feel safe, and not because of all the aspects that we already knew, but also to know that we do have a very capable civil aviation authority doing its job and remaining humble through it, and that keeps them on their toes so that they can keep getting better and better, even though they're already doing an awesome job. And with this, we've come to an end of another episode of CUR, Heart of CUR. I want to thank you once again for all your attention through this podcast, and also remind you to follow us on our different social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, Curacao International Airport. Let us know what you think about the podcast. But most importantly, if you have any questions, if you have remarks, if you want to know more about a subject, you have more questions about things that Peter stated, ask them on our social media platforms, and the team will be happy to answer these questions and engage in meaningful conversations about our aviation industry. Thank you. See you in another episode of CUR, the podcast in which we dive and we go deep into the heart and the soul of Curaçao's International Airport. I'm your host, Randa Costa Gomez. See you next time. Bye.